the championship coordinator for the association, and I will introduce our ladies in a second. One of the advantages of the dinghy show being virtual is the opportunity we have to be international this year. So it's great to be able to chat to other sailors from other areas and not just be limited to those that can make it to the actual physical show. Before we start, a couple of housekeeping. Can you please mute your microphones so we can stay focused on the ladies giving the talk, and use the chat option to type any questions in. And at the end of the talk, I will present your questions to the ladies. So let me introduce you to our three. So we have Katie Dwyer. She grew up sailing in a sailing family from Cork. Her racing history started in mirrors, moving through lasers and national 18s. She moved into keel boats and competitively crewed in Etchells and J24s, and competed for Ireland in international match racing events. Katie moved to the back of the boat when she joined the GP14 class and has been sailing with Michelle since 2014. And together they have progressed through the Silver Fleet into the Gold Fleet in Ireland and have regular top 5 results. Michelle Rowley grew up sailing in the west of Ireland, beginning team racing in university, and also got involved in enterprise crewing, which led to sailing as a crew in the GP14. And she has been to the Worlds in all 3 classes. So at our 2018 Worlds at Mounts Bay, Katie and Michelle were the first all-female boat. They had demonstrated how teamwork, time on the water with appreciation for time away from the water with young families, can be a recipe for enjoyable sailing and with good results to boot. And finally, our third participant today is Melanie Morris. She spent her childhood going to GP events where her parents were sailing. She herself sailed Optimists and Lasers before getting involved in team racing at university, and has represented Ireland at both Optimist and Team Racing Worlds. Despite hopping in and out of a GP on various occasions, she didn't compete regularly in the class until 2011 with Helm Owens. I think it's picking your helms there, Mel. She and Ger have been Irish national champions 3 times and were the first mixed male-female team at the last Worlds. So without further ado, I will hand over to the ladies and let them chat, because you don't want to be listening to me. So thank you.
Thank you, Vanessa.
Thanks, Vanessa.
Thanks, Vanessa.
It's nice to be here, and thank you for everyone for joining us and listening to us. Hopefully will be interesting. I thought we'd start by chatting. We've touched on a little bit about how we ended up in the GP fleet. I said I did grow up around GPs, and as Charlie has already pointed out, Curly is my dad. So I did spend a large part of my childhood running around at GP events when mum and dad were out sailing. And then after that, I was in and out of GPs a little bit, but without sailing them regularly. But maybe with that background, it was inevitable that I did end up in the GP class. I'm not sure if Ger thinks it's inevitable that he was in the GP class, but he is now. But Katie and Michelle, you've come to the class a different way. Do you want to chat a bit about that, Katie? Do you want to start?
Yeah, no worries. Thanks, Melanie. As Vanessa said, I sailed dinghies a lot in my early years in Cork, where I grew up. All different shapes and sizes at the front of the boat and at the back of the boat. And then I was crewing a lot in keel boats during my 20s. But I had my first daughter in 2013, and I was mad keen to get back on the water and get going again. And I live in Sutton, which some of you may have been to in Dublin. And in the local club, I called down one day pushing the pram with a 3-month-old baby into Hugh Gill, who is, as many of you know, a very enthusiastic GP sailor. So I said to Hugh, I said, look, I'd love to get going. The nationals I saw were coming in a month's time to Sutton. I said, if someone needs a crew, I'm more than happy to jump in. And he said, look, Katie, he said, if I can get you a boat and a crew, will you helm? And I said, yeah, I will. So he managed, as Hugh does, to find me a boat to borrow, found me a very capable crew who was a girl who was instructing on the sailing courses at the time. And we did the nationals, so I hadn't sailed in a while. It was a bit rusty, but thankfully the winds weren't too strong, and we had a reasonable event. But it got me back hooked to get dinghy sailing again. And GPs, I'm very fortunate that we have a great fleet locally and a great fleet nationally as well in Ireland. So I took it from there, bought a boat that winter and paired up with Michelle the following year when just after she had a baby, which is kind of a trend that we have. But that's how I fell into the GPs, and I've enjoyed it ever since. It's a great class, great racing, and I love the one design, and a very sociable class too.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
I'll just follow on from Katie. Most of my sailing really for me began in, say, in the west of Ireland, and then continued to university as well. And I, a bit like Mel, I sailed with the guy, I team raced with the guy for a long time, and he asked me, I was enterprise sailing, and then team racing was always going on in the background. And then he asked me, Graham Elms, and he asked me, would I sail a GP? And to be honest, it was kind of one of the last boats I would have ever thought I would have sailed, because I'm very, very light, and I knew a little bit about GPs from Sligo. Coming from the west, there's a big fleet in Sligo, and definitely thought I wouldn't sail one, but went out with him and we had a good time, and then we sailed together for a season. But he actually passed away then. Just before I had Rory, and then I ended up hooking up with Katie just after that, and we've had a great time since.
Yeah,
really, really enjoyable so far. Yeah.
Good. I think it's totally brilliant that you both kind of started getting, I know you all sailed beforehand, but that you kind of like started your GP careers really shortly after having had children. I have a 4.5-year-old, so that kind of happened in the middle, and I missed worlds because of it. But we all juggle having family and sailing, but I think we feel really strongly, we've talked about it, about how important that is for us and for our kids as well. How important it is for them to see us doing it, and important for us too to get out and get sailing and not always being a mummy.
Yeah.
Definitely agree with that. And we've all sailed with very young children, and made it work for sure. And I think especially it's quite important with, young children seeing us sail, and seeing, especially young girls, seeing other women sail, and that it's normal. It's like going out playing tennis. It's the same as going running. It's the same as golfing. But yeah, to definitely be able to do that it's brilliant. It's been brilliant.
And as you can see from the poster to promote this talk, all three managed to crash the photo shoot at the Worlds. And it was even my daughter Sophie was saying last night that she wanted to be there to get a hand on the trophy or whatever. So it's good for them to see it. Yeah.
Yeah, and Jared. So it's not Jared has young family as well. So it's not all sailors, it's not only women sailors have young family, and not all women sailors have family, but it
can be done.
Yeah, it can be.
Yeah.
But from generally women sailing, I guess it's our main challenges, I guess, Michelle, you've already alluded to it, are kind of the strength and weight. And Michelle, you've already said, but anyone who hasn't met you, you really are quite tiny. And I don't know, sometimes I don't, and the and the GP is pretty big, and I don't know exactly how you do manage it, because I think you just must be amazing. But how do you do it?
But like, actually going back to Sligo, going back to, I suppose, the GP fleet being there and knowing a little bit about it, I definitely had an image of the GP fleet being two guys, rugby kind of playing guys, sitting in a GP and just hike up wind, and that's what you do. But I suppose my main focus really, and even from team racing, would have been fitness, just to keep fit and to keep, and that helps. I suppose that the fitness definitely helps in that then you don't have to think about that aspect when you're on the race course. You can hike out, you don't have to think about the leg muscles, because you've got the fitness behind you. And then so then therefore you can concentrate on the racing. So it would be, for me, I suppose, just in fitness in general, was just a bit of running, a little bit of, and I'd always try to start training for Worlds or for, let's say for the summer, from about January on, and then from January till about April, I'd be running, maybe doing a bit of weights, and just yeah, to keep, because it's kind of the only thing I have in my back pocket, because I don't have, I can't hike out. I can hike out, but it doesn't, Katie will attest to this, it doesn't make a huge amount of difference sometimes, but
it all helps.
It all
Yeah.
helps, yeah. So, and we have, I think as well, I don't know if you'd agree with this, Kate, we have systems to do things, you know, that
like that's been critical. We've the boat that we have at the moment, we bought it a few years ago, and it had been sailed by two quite big guys, so we had to, and we wouldn't be fantastic at systems and coming up with new ideas, but we looked at other boats and spoke to other sailors about what they found worked. And two of the big changes we made were our uphaul downhaul system and also our spinnaker hoisting system. So for me, I'm a bit bigger than Michelle, so between us we're thereabouts, but I was just a bit slow getting the kite up around a weather mark, especially if it was a busy weather mark. So we put in a different system with a few extra purchases, which made a huge difference. And even for Michelle, the uphaul downhaul system, there was less of a battle getting that final clipping on the pole to the mast. So what I'd say to anyone, male or female, is if you do buy a boat, or if you're buying a second hand, or if you're buying a new boat where you can set it up from scratch, have a good look at the systems and have a good chat to other sailors who might be not as strong as some of the younger guys or whatever, or not as big, and see what works for them and be open to changing, because it definitely made a big difference for us. And even just getting that spinnaker hoist that like 5 seconds quicker, it just gets you out of a lot of trouble at the weather mark. And you can sometimes enjoy from in front seeing a little bit of a mess behind you that previously you might have been in the middle of.
And also we'd have a lot of strategies, like we would take down the kite would come down early, just so that we can have everything cleared away, so that when we ran that leeward mark, we're away straight away. And we probably would take it down a couple of seconds before other people, for sure, so that there isn't a mess, or there is something doesn't go wrong, hopefully, you know.
And there can be advantages in doing that if that you can find a little gap at a leeward mark or whatever, and because you're ready to go, you can nab it. So I think just being very open-minded, and we would spend a lot of time in our training as well, practicing just the timing of getting things right. So like, even if it's breezy and you're trying to jibe, not to do it at the right time is so critical. It's actually an easy jibe to do if you get the wind and the wave with you at the right time. We try not to have battles with the conditions as much as we can. We try and work with them.
We do something really quite similar, I suppose, in terms of choosing our moments and not battling with the conditions. And we've definitely played around with the boat a bit, but things like if it's windy and a tight reach, you know, just heading up that little bit longer so that you can bear away and get the pull on, because it's a strength thing for me anyway. It doesn't really matter, you know, you just don't have as much. I do some weights and I do some training as well. You're just never going to be as strong. It's very hard to be as strong. So things like just giving yourself a little bit of or if it's a very tight jibe, just to kind of bear out of it a little bit lower, so that you have that chance to get the pull on. Things like that make a difference. And if you can plan ahead and do it that way, it makes a big difference, we find. And crewing generally, Katie, Michelle, we've both come from team racing, which is very, well, it's very tactical, but it's also very boat handling specific. And Ger and I, in more recent years, we haven't had as much time to do as much training as we would like, but we've sailed together for a long time. And certainly when we were sailing together in team racing, we did a lot of practicing and boat handling. And I think you guys still managed to fit in quite a lot by the signs of it.
Yeah, I think living close, we both live pretty close to the club, so that helps. And we do, like, even getting out for an hour or an hour and a half of a Friday evening during the summer, that would help. And it all adds up. So that I think we've done, certainly before the Worlds, we did a good bit of practice.
Yeah, I think even if it's only an hour or two, it's just about making it meaningful and having purpose to the training session. So for us, it might be that we're going to do 20 tacks and 10 jibes and 20 tacks and 10 jibes. And that could be it. We go in, that's an hour, but we've achieved something. Or, you know, even in Sutton where we sail, there's a couple of little marks, and it might be just that we do a couple of approaches to a weather mark or a couple of approaches to a leeward mark. So even if the time is limited, if you give a purpose, I think you can get a lot out of it. We might go back and think about the last event, what went well or not so well for us, and maybe like if time and distance to the line hadn't been a strong feature, we might, you know, practice a little bit of that. So I think even if your time is limited, if you make a plan and use it well, use your time well, you can still get a lot out of it. And often we'd be out on our own. You know, we might go out with some of the other boats from Sutton, but even if you're on your own, you can achieve a lot. I think the other thing as well is, even if you only have 5 minutes, try and have a little debrief about how the session went. And you can move that forward then to the next time you get out.
Yeah, because we hadn't sailed together. We sailed together a little bit last summer. We went out once or twice, I think, and then we really hadn't sailed much the previous year. But the work we had put in at the Worlds was still there, because we still had all the systems we had for jibing and for tacking. It came back. That was the funny. We went up and down in front of the Martello Tower in Sutton there, and it was just the same as we had been sailing in 2018 for the Worlds. It was similar, the same systems. So yeah. Do you find that, Mel, or like you and Ger would have systems, I presume? And
yes, we do our systems, and we try to, well, kind of work out we know who's doing what, and then we just try to do it exactly the same way every time, whether it's light winds or heavy winds, and it does come back. So we've been sailing together for 20 years, not in the maybe, but it's a long time to have sailed together. So yeah, it does come back. And obviously last year none of us got very much sailing, but I'm hoping it does come back and we get sailing this year.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, just I think dividing your tasks sensibly. I mean, different people work in different ways, and I know even in terms of not all crews do the same things, but I think if you work out a plan between yourselves, whether that happens organically just because you've sailed so long together, which is possibly the way Ger and I do it, or you have a kind of a discussion, and once you know who's doing what, you kind of stick to that.
Yeah.
And then there's no confusion when it does get a bit tense or windy or whatever. Shall we talk about the wind? Because it seems to be if you're a woman, or if you're just lighter crew generally, a youth, the wind that we all kind of don't like to think about, but we do have to think about. So will we chat a bit about that?
Yeah.
So I always think there's kind of different aspects, for me anyway, there's different aspects to it. There's like the technical aspect to it and what you can do to your boat to make it a bit easier. Then there's the physical aspect, is kind of what you do in the boat and sort of training around it. And then for me as well, it's the mental aspect of it. It's quite a big thing. I think because sometimes there is that apprehension or, you know, in the wind and there's so much happening. So those are the three things that for me, I kind of try and think about. So I thought maybe we talk about the technical stuff first. Because we have played with so many things over the years in the GP, and I think we're still playing with a little bit in terms of what you can do to your boat to make it that little bit more manageable in the really windy stuff. And I don't know, I think we're still playing with it, so I'm not sure if we've totally hit on the right thing, because, you know, things change, but we've gone through lots of things. I'm sure, Katie, Michelle, you do some of these too. So do you know, it is quite big. So we have different systems of just trying to take some of that load off. So what a very, very easy thing to do in your boat is to put a ratchet on the, do you know, a sheet block? I don't know if you
that was one of our biggest investments pre the Worlds, and Michelle was like a different girl when we put that in.
And you.
Such an easy thing to do.
And simple.
Yeah, simple.
Very simple.
Yeah. But it didn't, I think that was Ger's idea actually. So thank you, Ger. But it was it's kind of a sort of revolutionary, but not very few people I think still have that. So that's a really good tip. Then if it is very windy, there's sort of other things, other controls that we'll play with. Bringing the center board up can make a big difference. I mean, obviously all these things do affect maybe your pointing and speed, but if it's properly survival, you kind of need to the gain is usually worth it. Do you use your centerboard as well?
Yeah, we would do the same. Someone gave us that tip, and we hadn't heard it before. I think it was before the Worlds, and I had never heard it. And you were the same, I don't think, Katie, you hadn't heard that.
No. And I actually just, as a helm balance wise, I find it one of the bigger, it has quite a big impact. You'd be amazed at just that, you know, that much how it can feel on the helm. It definitely does make a difference.
So just talking a little bit, like a centimetre or two, it's worth it. Yeah. It makes a really big difference. Then not last summer, summer before that, we experimented a bit with using a white sail. So for the last Worlds, we actually sailed the entire Worlds with a white sail, even though it wasn't an windy Worlds. But I know that the white sail, it feels very different in the wind. It doesn't knock around the boat as much. It's a little bit more forgiving. I know Dad, and that was a tip from Dad, because he had found that having sailed the GPs for so long, he remembered what the white sails were like. So that can be a really good way of dealing with the really heavy winds. And I said we then did a whole season with a white sail. I'm not sure, maybe the plastic sails are a little bit better when it's not windy, but you can do a whole season with just a white sail. So it doesn't necessarily mean you have to have 2 different sets of sails. That makes a big difference in the wind. And we will also sometimes, if it's really windy, drop our halyard a tiny bit and pull it, just to take, it's not quite a reef, but it's along those ideas. Yeah. All the different things. The other thing that we have in our boat is we bring our Spinnaker Sheets come a little bit further back than in most GPs, which is kind of is a little bit more forgiving then on tight reaches. You can spill a little bit more wind, but you still have your tweaker to pull it on when it's not so windy. So all of these things are, I said necessarily that you want to do them all at the same time, but it's really worth having a look at what other people are doing, I would say, and sort of finding something that works for you.
That's very interesting, Mel, about the Spinnaker Sheets, because it's not one I had heard of, but it makes sense. And again, it probably just brings back to the fore about, you know, having a look at the systems that are there and are they fit for purpose for you and your team that are sailing. Because, and even within the scope of the rules, like when we heard about the ratchet jib sheets, we just kind of assumed they weren't allowed because we didn't have them, you know. And once we realized they were, it was a revelation. Probably the best money we spent.
Yeah, and we had to change because our boat was set up for 2 guys who were young and super fit and the right weight, and everything was right to the like map. Yeah, exactly. So we had to do quite a bit of changing. And our Spinnaker system, especially, that was probably one of our biggest changes, and that was that benefited us a lot.
Just 2 things that I'd add on just more from the helming side as well in the wind. And you're right, you kind of, I know there's mornings you're at events and you look out the window and you're like, you can hear it and you're like, oh jeepers, I'm going to be exhausted by the end of the day, you know. It's like all of what Mel says there, other than the Spinnaker Sheets, I hadn't heard of that one, but we would take on board. But just from the helming point of view, I'd spent a lot of my years before getting into the GP crewing, so my helming was okay, but in the wind it wasn't, and I knew it because upwind we'd lose what we could gain downwind, which was quite frustrating at times. So 2 things that a coach pointed out to me from the way I was helming was the kicker. So obviously you try and depower the sails as much as you can, but I actually was totally underusing the kicker and what it could do for me. And what he actually did when he was coaching us is I hopped into the rib and he hopped into the boat, and I just watched what was happening to the leech of the sail as the kicker was being applied, and I could see the range that I needed to start using it for the windy stuff. So that was one thing that definitely helped a lot. And the other was just how I was helming. I don't like pinching, and I think I sailed with someone years ago who over pinched, and it used to drive me crazy because you could kind of feel the boat just slowing down too much. But there is a fine line where it works, and it was about using that and also preempting the gust. So if Michelle says to me, you know, gust in 3 boat lengths or whatever it's going to be, that I'm nearly engaging in that little pinch a tiny bit ahead of getting that gust. Now, obviously being mindful of, like, if it's a header, then that's not going to be pretty because you might end up tacking and swimming. But there was just a few little tips like that I wouldn't have come across myself, but made a big difference. And that's stuff that you can figure out, but also talking to good sailors in the fleet and who seem to do well in windy weather, it's well worth having a chat to see what tips they might have.
That's really interesting. I've been crewing for so long that that sort of stuff passes me by a bit more.
Yeah.
And just going back to Katie, Katie was saying how we just on a kind of slight tangent, we got a bit of coaching before the last Worlds, and like not a huge amount, only a small amount. And one evening we went, remember a Friday evening we went out, and that was invaluable, like, because it's someone else who, he wasn't a GP sailor, but it was someone just looking at us from outside the boat, looking at different systems, different things we were doing, like as Katie was saying, the pinching, or and then it was another, for me it was how I take down the spinnaker, and he gave me like a way more efficient way of taking down the spinnaker, getting all that power out of it as quickly as possible. And I think that was invaluable before a big event like the Worlds. And that's, like I said, often a bit of a tangent, but it was good.
That's good. And then, so that, I think we've covered the technical stuff, but then there's the physical, the tiredness, the other physical side to feeling in the wind. Obviously you have to hike. There's no way around it. And I don't know that anything really prepares you for hiking except for
hiking.
So, yeah. So I don't know how we're all going to feel whenever we haven't been doing very much sailing when we get back. It's going to be a shock to the legs.
I've heard of people here with homemade hiking benches, and there's like a bucket of water at the kind of with a bit of a rope going through a lever. Now it works, I'm sure, but I don't know if I can put myself through it.
Keep running, lots of running.
Virtual,
Yeah.
Are you coming into town now?
Oh
no, because I wanted that check. You don't mind,
excuse me. I think Margaret. Could you turn your
lights on,
please?
No, yeah. Okay, so great. I'm just trying to listen to this. Okay, I'll let you go. So I'm just
okay.
I'll keep going.
Yeah, keep going.
Keep going. Okay, so the physical.
Yeah. It's just about racing and it's women, and I'm just listening to you.
Oh my God! Please don't say we're bad.
Katie, you already talked about the kind of the sort of in the windy stuff, the kind of the beat. The beats are the slog, where you kind of really. What I know when Jar and I are doing some of this windy stuff, it's really about trying to work as hard as we possibly can to hold our position upwind, because unless there's a really big shift or something, we're not going to speed upwind, we're not going to beat boats upwind. Sorry, but we will often gain downwind, but there's nothing more depressing than gaining a lot of places downwind and then just losing them all upwind.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah, for sure.
So that's kind of, but then it can be really fun in the downwinds, and it can be really in the
yeah, no, it's good. Yeah.
So the windy stuff isn't all about pain, it can be really good fun as well.
Yeah.
Really important to emphasize, and you can go really fast and really annoy a lot of really big male crews if you're going past them. So it's worth saying telling you about the good stuff too. We're reminding you about the good stuff.
And definitely the more you do it, the less you'll fear it, I think, for sure. And like my strategy for a while was to hope for a shortened course. That's not a very good strategy. So by just improving on how you sail through it, and things like, I know I mentioned earlier about the timing of a jibe, like do not dream of going for a jibe downwind if this until the time is perfect, because it's risky. You kind of go into the jibe, then it doesn't really happen. You have to get back out of it. The boat gets wobbly and the outcome isn't always good. So don't be afraid to wait for the right time.
And we sometimes, like if it's howling, we don't pop the kite always, and it's game,
and that's okay too.
And that's okay, not to be heroes, but to get your place. Like we did well in Sutton one time, in popping it, because we managed upwind, and then we were going pretty fast downwind without the kite and without the hassle of the kite. So it was, I
think there was a lot of reaches in that one, and it was just, and because that Genoa is if you that filling
Yeah.
and a spinnaker. Yeah, anyway.
We were yeah. So that's another strategy.
No, that's a good one. But mentally, I think, and I sort of, there's always a bit of psyching yourself up. Jared kind of often tells me to find my aggression and to use it, which is a really good thing for me, at least, to be reminded of, because I'm not an aggressive person at all. So, and sometimes if you're going into the jibe, it's not a kind of a building up sort of tension. It's just to kind of
go for it,
and to go for it, and not to be scared of it. And he's good at reminding me about that, because you know, and because that's part of it, is that we are sailing as a team, so that really helps. And I tell him he's hiking really hard, which he is, and that isn't meant to be. So and so we kind of, you know, give each other support that way, and it's especially when it's windy. But it's that mental side of it, and maybe I don't know whether that's a girl thing or not, but for me that really helps. To just get my mind in the right place for sort of going for it when it is windy, and getting my mind over that kind of particular hurdle. So yeah, and yeah, just not to be scared of it, I guess.
Yeah.
I have two other really good tips for sailing in the wind, and one of them, which are not really related to sailing, one of them, if it's a really, really, really windy day, have somebody on shore who will help you pull your boat up slip.
Oh, I like that one, Mel.
That's a good one.
And the other one is from Libby Tierney. Actually gave me this tip at the end of last season, the one event we did. And it's actually good for not even windy days, but for medium days as well, because I get very sore hands, just, you know, from holding the ropes and so on. And she told me to rub arnica cream into your hands, and it worked, and it was brilliant. And I will be doing that from now on. So
good tip.
That's my other tip on sailing in the wind. So will we talk about the Worlds, because that's quite exciting. Obviously they're not happening this year, although I think that's probably a really good thing, given that we don't even know when we're both going to get back to sailing. But Skerries next year, which is just north of Dublin, for anyone who hasn't been, it's a really, really nice spot, and it's going to be good fun. And so we should mention, because we are women, we should mention that there is the potential chance to introduce 2 new World Championships into that event, which is an all-female World Championship and a mixed crew World Championship. And the class need 20 entries to hold either event. Everybody will be sailing together, but if they get 20 mixed crew, there will be a World Champion. And if you get 20 all-female boats, there will be an all-female World Champion. So that's quite exciting. And I think we'll definitely all be going. Is it going? It would be good to get lots of entries.
Yeah.
I take you're looking forward to it?
Yes. Yeah, it'll be good to get a big event again. I think one thing I'm not looking forward to are gate starts. So the more that we can practice those at events here and through coaching or whatever, the better. It's definitely well worth practicing. Even for us at the Worlds the last time, our results in the early part of the week weren't as good as the end of the week, and I think a lot of it was down to us just getting used to gate starts. And
it got better though. It definitely got better, and it is.
Yeah, I know it did, but it
practice.
Yeah,
and knowing where to start on the gate start.
And even I made the mistake. I think it was the practice race, which was the best time to have a mistake. We had been practicing some gate starts over here, but so there was like a pathfinder and a guard boat and a gate boat, but we had just practiced with the pathfinder and the guard boat. So I kind of in my mind just was expecting to see one rib or motorboat, and I forgot about the one that was coming behind. So I started to round up, and I was politely told where to go. Now it turned out fine, but it was even a little thing like that. So we'd been so practicing and in the zone, but we just hadn't replicated fully the reality, and it just slipped my mind. But thankfully, no one was.
I think injured. They are. Once you get used to them, though, they are. I don't mind them once you're used to them. I think they're an easier way of starting in huge fleets than say line starts. But I don't mind them. Yeah.
Will you be doing some training beforehand? What prep will you do?
I think a lot of it will be trying to get out locally and trying to get our own training going, and then pairing up again locally with the other boats. Trying to get to Skerries for a couple. They'll probably run a couple of events to practice, and we probably will get some coaching as well. I think that was really time well spent, as Michelle said. What we did though was we got sort of our own house in order before we engaged with the coach, so that we got the most out of his time as well.
Sure.
But and then trying to get to our regionals over here in Ireland, and maybe get across to the UK for one or two as well, once we can all move around a bit easier.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And what about you, Mel? I know you and Ger are you're in different parts of
we live,
the
actually,
country.
not everyone will realise this, because I live in I'm in Northern Ireland and Ger is in Dublin, so it's a little harder for us to get out training regularly. We do. So last summer we did, when the restrictions eased a little, we did get out a couple of weekends, and I'm sure we'll try and do that so this summer and through, and do some training weekends if we can, and events. And before, I mean, last year we had hoped to get over to a UK event, so I guess it's so hard to know when everything is still so uncertain about when we can travel and what we can do. But I know we'll just try and get out sailing as soon as we can. And we got a new boat last year, which we've only sailed a handful of times, so it'll be fun to kind of get used to that and see how it goes properly. So we've only sailed it a few times.
Yeah. It's at home in the garage.
It's not. Ger has it. I used to keep them in the garage. Ger has this one because it's
it's a plastic boat, right?
Plastic boat, yes.
What's differences between plastic and wooden? Ours is wooden. Ours is a wooden boat. So have you seen much, or have?
It feels a little bit, it looks really different, obviously. It feels a bit different. The biggest thing in some ways that I've noticed, and I wasn't expecting this, and I probably noticed it, maybe because I'm not really short, but I'm about 5'6", is that the floor in it is ever so slightly higher. So I did notice that when I come to do the spinnaker, it's actually slightly easier, because an extra little bit of height gives me a slightly better angle to spinnaker pull out on. So that was nice to discover. I'm glad it wasn't around.
It's a better option than wearing high heels in the boat to get there.
Yes, yes, I think so.
Especially no wooden one. Yeah.
Looking forward to it, and just have a good event. So should we open it up? Unless you have anything to say, will we open up to questions? Yeah,
if anyone has any questions, more than happy to answer.
Yes, I've got a couple of questions here. Sorry, the questions are from Ger. Katie, having crewed for so long, how did you find the transition to helming?
I'd been crewing for a long time, and I actually think that helped me when I did move to the back of the boat. As a crew, I'd experienced how, you're getting shouted at for the poles not going up right, or the spinnaker collapse during a jibe or whatever, but it does often fall on the hands of, it can be as much the helm and how they helm through a jibe, for instance, as much as the crew trying to float a spinnaker. So it was really useful for me when I did helm, having an appreciation for what was involved in crewing. I found that I probably asked a lot of questions, and I know I've said that before, but even from the likes of Ger or Shane or people in Ireland, if I was struggling with certain things like helming upwind and things like that, just looking for tips and ideas about how to improve on that. And probably another thing is that I did play it safe, and I do tend to play it safe, but less so now. But things like just getting around the course well, keeping your eyes in the boat. I would probably ask Michelle a lot of questions just for her to give me an idea of what's going on in the race course, and then take a quick look myself, and then go back and look at those telltales, because sometimes I know for me, if I take my eyes off them, the boat slows down. So I would have been very mindful of my life as a crew, the sort of the the opportunity you have to see the full race course and try and get an idea of what's going on, and if there's boats going downwind, what's happening for them versus going upwind, so that you can try and see what shifts might be coming down. So but I certainly would I wouldn't be afraid of it, and I would encourage, because a lot of the time you see females in the GP class as crews, but I think there's definitely plenty of room for them at the back of the boat as well, and it's very manageable.
Thank you, Katie. The next question is from, I think it's Nikki Brown. What techniques do you manage to build up to start?
To start the race? You there, Nick? I see Nikki there, yeah.
Hello, yeah. It's just that anxiety gets to us often before the start, and how you prepare and work out where to start as well is,
for what it's worth, I've never had my heart rate checked in the kind of final 2 or 3 minutes before a race, but I'd say it's fairly pounding, and like there's been times when you kind of feel a bit nauseous, depending on a race. And actually we did an event, so it's 2019, because really there was very little last year, and I'd had a baby that year, so I hadn't sailed since the Worlds, and I was sick going out that morning. But once you kind of get back into it, you're fine. So look, I think just things like being set up right. So know when you leave the shore that your boat is set up right, that you guys are set up right. You've eaten, you're good to go. Like even for the Worlds, Michelle and I had a list, and every day before we launched from the beach in Mounts Bay, we went through that list, and it was everything from, do we have our lunch? Do we have spare shackles and all that kind of stuff? To is the rig set up right? Have we got our tuning right? So when you leave and you're on the water, just that you have that peace of mind, I think is a great start. So for the start of the race itself, testing checking the bias of the line, having a look up the race course, see are there any dark clouds on the left or the right that might suggest there's going to be a shift, or that it might be windy or one side or the other. And again, just staying out of trouble. So if you think the pin end is where you want to be, maybe at the start, just decide, okay, I'm going to be left of the middle. And as you get more confident, then you get further to that pin end. But I would say that if I got, I would never be the one starting at the pin. I might be 4 or 5 boats up, but that's probably as far as I go. But we do generally get good starts by playing it that way. And making sure you protect a gap to leeward. So one thing, Michelle, she often is facing backwards before a start, just watching what's going on behind. And if she sees that Johnny over there looks like he could take that gap to leeward, I'll go down and try and protect it. So I think that gap, it gives you a great peace of mind, so that even if you're a little bit slow off the line, you have it to bear into, and you don't have someone sitting there who's going to cause you trouble. So yeah, but just being prepared. Yeah.
And Katie's right about being prepared. And the previous Sam Watson was the previous talk, and he spoke about something similar. He talked about a checklist as well, and that's having the peace of mind going out.
It was brilliant.
That everything is from your bungs to your water to your measurements, everything is okay. So you have that peace of mind going out. So that's something gone. You can take that off your worry list. And then we would talk a lot, as Katie was saying, I would tell her there's gaps or there's no gaps or there's someone coming from behind, or so a good communication, I think, at the start is important as well.
And you always know the guys in the fleet that will try and so they might come in and take the gap. So I'm not going to put names in them, but Michelle might be like, oh, Jimmy's coming, and I'll definitely go down and protect. And Nikki, like if you guys, like we can, if you ever want to have a call and talk through it in more detail, do, because I know what you mean. Like you'd be nervous, but once, keep things simple. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, good ladies. You mentioned the new categories that we were considering. We don't think that the mixed crews, the 20 entries, will be an issue, but obviously the female crews. Can you think of any other fleets that we can encourage people to come from to join us at the Nationals and the Worlds, to encourage females into the class for those events?
Oh, is it?
Oh, sorry, hi.
Anne is there, yeah.
No, hiya, guys.
Hi, Anne.
It's lovely to see everybody, first of all.
Yeah.
Curly asked me to send something out a little while ago about mixed fleets and about the change to the championships. And I think, Katie, you got something from me and various other people have. From the 420s, I think we're going to get some people coming that way. Emily, who sailed with us a couple of years ago at Abersock, and she's past 420, and she's got quite a few contacts there. So hopefully we'll get the 20 all-female boats, which I'm obviously personally delighted about, because I've always felt that we needed more recognition to have an all-female boat, hence obviously the trophy. So, so that's just my little contribution. But thank you now for doing this, guys. It's really important. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
Yeah, welcome. That would be great to get 20.
Yeah, it'd be fantastic.
Yeah, obviously the 420s and the 470s are the obvious fleets to go to. Are there any other fleets that come to mind? I'll let you think on that. You can get back to me.
Yeah.
Okay, we're drawing to close to the start of the next talk, and unfortunately we can't overlap our Zoom talks. So thank you very much, ladies. It has been very informative, very interesting. A couple of points I can build on is you mentioned fitness, so I can put in a little plug for our fitness for sailing session tomorrow with Gemma Dobson. And somebody else has asked, yes, if we have remembered to click the record button, this talk will be up on the website for you to go back and follow through on. So can I thank Mel, Katie and Michelle, please, for their time and agreeing to have their arms twisted by a few of us to do this.
No bother. No. And honestly, very happy to, if any ladies out there want to link in with us individually, please do, because we'd be delighted to see more in the fleet, and those of you already in the fleet, you know, pushing on the way you hope. So yeah.
Definitely.
Thank you very much. I'm sure you will get loads of incoming information for that. So just a quick one. We've got Mike Senior talking in 12 minutes. And then tomorrow we have, as mentioned, the sailor fitness, wooden boat preparation, all things GP in America, and cruising with Oliver Shaw as are the rest of our talks. Many thanks, ladies, and enjoy the show.
Thanks.
Well done, Katie. Well done.
See you, folks.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thanks. Bye.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
No problem.